An artist's life. How do you imagine the life of an artist? Take a look behind the scenes of the last 2 decades of Christoph Steinbach. The development of the scene, organization of festivals, ups and downs, meeting with stars. This documentary certainly contains 1 or 2 matches from the lives of organizers, artists and music lovers. Christoph Steinbach, An Artist's Life. Chapter 1. The Beginnings.
That you get up 2 hours before the concert, drive to the concert, play the concert, and then have after parties until at least 11 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't quite confirm that. There are certainly a few nights like that at the beginning. Everything is new. You want to be there, you want to be cool. You want to experience the stories you've heard from your idols, but your body wouldn't be able to hold out for too long.
Aber der Körper würde das.
I also think the more professionally you do this job, the shorter the after parties get, the shorter the nights get, the smaller the alcoholic drinks get.
Desto kleiner werden die alkoholischen Getränke.
That's how most young talents feel when they make their first appearances. Everyone is enthusiastic, motivates you. You're excited. You already feel like a little star. You're full of energy and take it all with you. Parties, invitations.
Ja, wir haben wirklich alle
Yes, we really played everything across the board.
kleinsten Hochzeiten.
From the smallest wedding to award ceremonies, golf club award ceremonies, birthdays, bars into the early hours.
Ich habe nie daran gedacht,
I never thought or worked on becoming a professional musician.
wollte ich eigentlich auch gar nicht.
I didn't really want to. I just wanted to play and have fun.
Spaß haben.
I started playing with a Dixie band from Kitzbühel when I was 13 or 14, and I played double bass with a quarter double bass.
Mit so einem Viertel
I
von
think it's the smallest double bass there is, because I wasn't that big. And I played with the Dixie band for 11 years, and we always played 1 or 2 boogies with the drummer from the Dixie band during the breaks.
immer 1, 2 Boogies.
I'd put down the bass, sneak over to the piano, and then crack out 2 boogies, really full-throttle boogie-woogies, which of course went down well.
Vollgas Boogie Woogies. Die sind natürlich
On the one hand, I had the youth bonus.
aber den Jugendbonus
Boy in the background playing the bass,
im Hit
puts it on the floor, goes to the piano, turns the volume up and shreds a boogie into it.
fetzt da eine Boogie rein.
And of course the surprise effect was always great.
Das Effekt natürlich immer groß.
It went down well.
Da sind dann die ersten Leute.
The first people came up to me and said, "We're having a little golf tournament.
Wir haben da ein kleines Golf.
Wouldn't you like to play boogie woogie with us during the breaks or in between at the beginning?" And that's what we did. It was a fun time. Then there were more and more gigs than the first birthdays and so on.
Und so weiter. Mein erster bezahlter Auftritt, wobei auch
My first paid performance, I wouldn't call it that way. It was more of a session show. 1 or 2 numbers was at the Young Citizens Party in Kitzbühel. When I was 17 years old, I was nervous, had my hair really blow-dried, a nice suit, and then I did 1 or 2 numbers.
Ja, und dann haben wir uns gedacht,
Yes, and then we thought to ourselves, we should rehearse a bit. In order to perform a bit better together, that we should rehearse some numbers. We then had vocal numbers and special stops. We always concentrated very much on the breaks, the stops, the transitions, loud and quiet, and so on.
Idole, Vince Weber, Axel Zwingenberger und so weiter haben wir uns von der Schallplatte noch runtergehört, 1:1 nachgespielt im Haus.
And then we also listened to numbers of our idols Vince Weber, Axel Zwingenberger, and so on from the record. Played them 1-to-1 in the house, on the second floor in my bedroom at the time. We carried the drums up every time and turned up the volume on the digital piano, connected the speaker, and that's where we had the first 2 rehearsals. And then, relatively quickly, Armin, the drummer, found a rehearsal room in Kitzbühel near the landfill site. There was a staircase down behind the landfill, and next to the stairs was a large container, and next to the container was another entrance. There was a butcher, and in the container was all the waste from the slaughterhouse. I remember exactly how horrible it was in summer, how it stank out of there, and the stench always drifted down the stairs to the rehearsal rooms. I understood why there were only rehearsal rooms for musicians and no offices or anything like that. But it was a fun time. We had a rehearsal room. I don't think we had to pay anything for it, and that's where we worked out and learned our first really good songs, and that's how we got our first paid gigs in Kitzbühel. At the Kitzbühel Fair down at the Griesel, that was always legendary. We could play there. I was so proud of my first solo gigs, which I got as a boogie pianist in a real jazz club, Papas Tapas, in Vienna. They called me and said, "Wouldn't you like to play a concert down here?"
Und sagt, willst du da unten nicht ein Konzert spielen?
I got 700 shillings from Papas Tapas, had to pay for my own transportation, had to pay for my own room, had to pay for my own drinks in the club, had to pay for my own food. So it was a huge minus. On top of that, I remember going to my first gig in Vienna at full speed in my 45 horsepower Polo on the highway. The highway police stopped me and I had the windows down, and I just grinned because I was so happy that I could play down there. Just paid my fine and drove on again with a grin. I still don't know how you can drive too fast in a 45 horsepower Polo, but it must have been like that. In any case, I played, drove back, and that was my first official concert. Back then I worked at Nürnberg, instrument making in Kitzbühel, making harps and zithers. A great boss, by the way. And I was able to organize my own time, which is of course a great advantage as a musician. I worked from 7 in the morning until 12. I was on my way to Vienna at 12:30, played my concert there, and drove back at, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning and at 8 or something like that. Or I just divided up my time as it worked out when I would be back, then went back to work, and so everything was still physically possible back then. I was so full of euphoria and there now and then back to work, and then again musician, and so on, and I never had any stress about money or anything back then. I didn't really care whether I earned anything as a musician or not. If I get something, it's great. If not, it doesn't matter. I didn't have that much pressure because I had a part-time income, which wasn't much, but that was enough, and I was just happy that I could play.
Einkommen gehabt, was jetzt auch nicht viel war, aber das hat mir gereicht. Und ich war einfach froh, dass ich spielen kann.
Chapter 2: Concerts and Organization. The plunge from a financially secure part-time musician to a full-time freelance artist is psychologically a completely different level. No 14 salaries, no fixed income, no paid vacation, no paid sick leave, no transfer of risk or responsibilities. Of course, there are not only negative sides. You are your own boss. Individual time management, except for playing times, extremely high artistic freedom, and not to forget, hobby becomes profession. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Ja, ich hab's damals schon auch gescheit gehabt.
Yes, I did let it rip back then. Except for drugs, I always had too much respect for that. I didn't even try it. In those days, I also saw a lot of colleagues drowning, figuratively speaking. At that time, I was already concentrating a lot on practicing and working out the pieces. How do you play this number? How do I have to play it so that it sounds like my idols, Mead Lux Lewis, Pete Johnson, or the more modern boogie players? Axel Zwingelberger, Vince Weber.
Pete Johnson oder auch den moderneren Boogie-Pianisten Axel Zwingelberger, Vince Weber.
Hours of practicing, hundreds of times. Always the same beat with the left hand. The record player and the Walkman are always next to the piano. Why doesn't it sound like Axel's or Vince's, even though I play exactly the same?
Also, with the record player, I always put the needle back and played along again. Put the needle back a bit and played along again. I repeated it 50 to 100 times. Also with the Walkman and again, and with the Walkman back then. I had one of those Sony Walkmans where you could also record. After repeating it 20 or 30 times, I recorded it myself. Once, and then listened to it to see if it sounded like the original. Of course it didn't. Then I practiced another 50 times. I always wanted to perform the number on stage only when it was the way I imagined it. I didn't always succeed because I'm impatient. But sometimes you couldn't hear the difference that much.
Dann teilweise nicht so wahnsinnig gehört.
The level of familiarity rose immensely, and not just local. Word quickly got around that the new, young boogie and blues pianist who played a piano so full of energy that here and there he even tore a string or two, who stomped his feet like there was no tomorrow, who even, this wasn't the exception, left bloody keys on the grand piano, had showed up in the scene. His piano-playing skills may not have been to his liking yet, but the energy and joy that he spilled over into the audience was 200%. His mind was completely free. Financially, he felt no pressure. But that was about to change soon.
The requests for festivals and concerts became more and more, and among them the Shake the Lake Festival asked me if I wanted to play there, and of course. I was totally enthusiastic and I immediately said yes before he finished talking on the phone, because that's where it all came together. The best of the scene were there. Vince Weber, Axel Zwingenberger, Joe Bonesack, and everything was concentrated in one place. And at that time, I also played once a week during the season at the Tenorhof in Kitzbühel, and in the middle of the season, I got a call to the Tenorhof. I was called by the porter during the break. Yes, the phone is for you, and I said, who's calling me? Now, the director of the Tenor Kitzbühel heard that I was playing there and creating a bit of an atmosphere and called me and told me to come and see him. He wanted to do something with me. And we had an idea. Yes, we should organize a bigger boogie night. And that was my first contact with organization. I was given a budget and had to make something out of it. A great event. There is a tree outside behind the barn in the center of Kitzbühel, and we built a wooden stage around the tree over the bed. And then I thought, okay, that's not quite possible with the budget. Now I did the sound myself. I canceled the sound engineer again and gathered together all the boxes myself. Every little box at home in the rehearsal room, and so I did the sound myself, and then of course I forgot that you also have to budget for pianos and overnight. Accommodation for the artists, we forgot. I forgot everything, of course. I was a beginner when it came to organization, and then I thought, well, I've already played Shake the Lake once. I know the musicians there, and I called two of the musicians, Clemens Vogler and Richie Lloydel, and I knew that they had their own pianos, which they take with them to gigs, and I said I'd book them now, because they have the pianos with them for little money, and that's how it was. They came. Then I had the musicians. I had the pianos. The weather was fantastic, and the people were in a great mood. The whole town was packed. The atmosphere was great. The musicians were in a great mood. It wasn't a big project, but for me it was the first and successful, and I was overjoyed that I got the chance to do the project. I made a huge loss, but I didn't care. I only saw the happy people that evening, and we were so hacking into the piano.
Music has a special effect on people, even if it is usually only perceived subconsciously. If you imagine, for example, a commercial or a movie without music, unimaginable. Any tension, sadness, or weariness disappears. A look full of expectation that is not accompanied by strings, percussion, and wind instruments loses 3/4 of its effect. Without music, even a Schwarzenegger only seems half as strong.
Ja, Musik
Yes, music somehow shapes people. It does something to them, it does something to their psyche, to their mood. People need music, whether consciously or unconsciously. It's just the way it is. I notice it all the time. Just looking into the audience at a concert, it seems to me that people forget their problems for a few
Die
hours.
Leute vergessen ihre Probleme für ein paar Stunden. Auch ich, wenn ich Probleme habe oder
Even me, when I have problems or when I'm in a bad mood, and then there's the concert, it's like taking a happy pill. You have fun and everything and the rhythm. It's like magic, even with the audience, with me, my fellow musicians, and then we all go home and everything is back to normal.
gehen wieder alle nach Hause und alles ist normal.
Smaller jobs as artistic director keep coming in, and you have to jump in at the deep end, so to speak. Suddenly, you're responsible for what happens on stage.
Ja, die Organisation fängt ja schon damit an, zumindest meine Art der Organisation.
Yes, the organization starts with, at least my kind of organization, booking artists who understand each other. You already know some of them from festivals, and you get to know who gets on with whom and who doesn't get on so well with whom.
Im Laufe der Zeit.
You kind of get a feeling for that as time goes by, and yes, I've always placed a lot of value on the artists getting along, from arriving, greeting, and especially backstage just before you go on stage, because then you have a great concert because of that, and the after parties are also gigantic when artists get on well. It all builds up.
Gigantisch, wenn sich Künstler gut verstehen. Das schaukelt sich dann
And
alles.
then there are artists who arrive and think they are the big world stars and need their own backstage space, which is perhaps okay, but that doesn't bring people together. That creates a different kind of concert, which I'm not really working towards.
Was vielleicht auch okay ist.
I'm more interested in everyone getting along, and in this respect, I've actually had the best experiences with real world stars from the 60s and 70s.
Ich stehe mehr drauf, dass sich
Rock stars like that are actually the most uncomplicated. They don't need a big backstage room. They get on immediately with the no-name artists,
70er Jahre gemacht. So
and I've really had a lot of fun with them.
Rockstars. Die brauchen keinen großen Backstage-Raum, verstehen sich sofort mit den No-Name-Künstlern. Und mit denen habe ich sehr viel Spaß gehabt.
Whether an event or concert is successful depends on many factors. The artistic quality is usually not the top priority. You shouldn't plan the concert from the perspective of the artist, but from the perspective of the audience. A stage, for example, looks completely different from the audience's view. The audience does not see, for example, that there are hundreds of cables lying on stage. In ideal circumstances, the lighting has an enormous effect on the audience and is a very important point. By contrast, the lighting is often distracting and dazzling for the artist. As a result, the field of vision usually doesn't even reach the second row of the audience.
Ja, zum Glück lernt man dazu.
Fortunately, you learn more. I remember the first time I booked Vince Weber, my great idol, for a gig in the Tene. The budget was also very tight, but I really wanted to bring Vince in, and I didn't have the budget for lighting equipment to make sure it was nicely lit, and then I positioned 3 small reading lamps around the grand piano, and that was it. It was terrible, of course, and I still feel sorry for Vince today, but that's the way it was. Either a nice lighting system or Vince Weber.
Schöne Lichtanlage oder Vince Weber. Genauso ist es mit den Hotelzimmern.
It's the same with the hotel rooms. A nice hotel room for an artist is worth its weight in gold. Unfortunately, very few promoters know that these days, because artists usually travel a lot, live out of a suitcase, are only on the road, and when they arrive at the venue and check into a 0-star guest house that is not heated in winter, then of course they are not so happy.
Nicht beheizt ist im Winter.
I've been able to try it all out several times. For example, after a 10-hour drive, in the organizer's son's room on an inflatable air mattress that had a small hole in it, with my snoring colleague next to me, or, for example, on the rattan bench in the wellness area of a 5-star hotel where we slept after a concert, we went to bed at 5 o'clock. The cleaner came at 6 o'clock, woke us up. We had to get out of there now.
Im Wellnessbereich in einem 5-Sterne-Hotel haben wir geschlafen.
Yes, on the other hand, we also had great rooms in 5-star hotels. We have had whole 300 square meter areas, or at Brenner's Park Hotel in Baden-Baden, which are also different experiences.
In 5-Sterne-Hotels ganze 3
You simply come to the sound check in a completely different way when you are accommodated in a beautiful hotel.
Die anderen Erlebnisse, man kommt einfach ganz anders zum Soundcheck, wenn man in einem schönen Hotel untergebracht ist.
Just like a builder who uses the same budget to build a house that is doomed to be demolished or one that will last for 2 to 3 generations, you can put an infinite amount of time and energy into organizing an event. It doesn't necessarily have to do with more or less budget, rather with a lot of passion, positive thinking and a lot of time. That's not for everyone. In this day and age, people want to see money for the work they do. With that attitude, you're in the wrong place in the event sector. Of course, it is possible to earn money, but as in top-class sport, only some succeed.
Yes, I think it was around 2002 that the Kitzbühel Tourist Board came to me and asked me if I wanted to take over one evening of the Thursday concerts. They always had a musical program every Thursday during summertime, and I was supposed to take over one Thursday and organize a few musicians and a boogie session. At the same time, that was the time when we always had the sold-out Tene concerts every year, once at the beginning of January and once legendary, the Fashion's Tene Boogie Night. We called it Dress and Dance for Boogie Woogie. It was always great fun. Back then, we still only had the little reading lamps around the grand pianos, but it was so much fun. We stood in the grand piano. Sometimes we shouted along with the people. The people shouted along with us. We danced the Polonaise. One of us played the piano. Then we swapped pianos again.
Der eine hat Klavier gespielt, dann haben wir wieder Klavier getauscht. Ja, und dann ist der Michael Fritz,
And then Michalich Fritz, the director of the Tene, came to me and said, shouldn't we do a big concert? A really big concert. Then I said, well, let's do a festival for around 3 days. And then within, I think, 10 seconds between door and hinge, we decided, well, let's do it. We'll organize a festival now. At that time, I was still playing in the Dixie Band, double bass, which I gave that up. Or rather, we broke up the Dixie Band.
Oder wir haben uns aufgelöst, besser gesagt, die Dixie Band.
And back then, I started playing drums as a teenager. I was the drummer in a cover rock band that was on the road a lot in the Kitzbühel area. I also left the band, which still exists, by the way. It's called Jabberwocky. And then I concentrated fully on the festival, because I knew it would be a bit more work than organizing a Tene concert.
Festival konzentriert, weil ich wusste, ja, wird ein bisschen mehr Arbeit sein, wie so ein Tene-Konzert zu organisieren.
So the plunge into the deep end has begun. Probably the smallest festival team in the world, consisting of just 2 people, set off on a bumpy, exhausting, but at the same time beautiful journey. The first meeting took place at a small, somewhat chaotic desk. 1 small pad, a pencil, and 2 inexperienced festival bosses infected with healthy naivety. The first question was, how many days are we starting with? Is 3 days too much? Is 1 day too little?
Wir haben uns dann kurz zusammengesetzt, ein bisschen
We
brainstormt.
then sat down together briefly, brainstormed a bit about whether we should do 2 days or 3, but we then decided unanimously, 3 days. The festival really has to be a hit. We then went through all the budget things, started writing, and halfway through we said stop. So more than 2 days wouldn't work. We don't know how the whole thing will develop. Will people even come? Will it be accepted? We postponed the Thursday for a year, that we would do it together with the TVB, and then we decided on Café Praxmir in Kitzbühel. that we would do an evening there on the cabaret stage and an open-air concert. A big one at the Schwarzsee. Unfortunately, it didn't work out because it rained.
Weil es leider geregnet hat.
She closed every door and every window too.
Wir sind dann statt
Instead of the Schwarzsee open air, we went to the Kulturhaus Rieth. The festival was a huge success. We had Axel Zwingenberger with us. We had Joe Bonsack with us. We had Richie Lloydel with us. Then we had the newcomers from Poland with us, the Boogie Boys.
Sekunden.
3 seconds after the final applause, we said, "We'll carry on. We'll step on the gas. We'll try to build it all up." We were hot.
After a successful festival baptism, you naturally get a taste for it and want an increase for the following year. And in the following weeks, a series of coincidences should be the start of a new kind of boogie festival.
Und von da an wusste ich, was arbeiten heißt. Maximal 7 bis 10.
And from then on, I knew what working meant. A maximum of 7 to 10 days vacation a year, working 7 days a week from 9 in the morning until 1, usually 2 in the morning, no exaggeration. And at that time, I also had concerts, up to 5 a week, with travel, rehearsing programs, and so on, and all the preparations for the festival on the side. Of course, it all took 10 times as long because I did it all myself for cost reasons. We didn't have a graphic designer. I learned or trained it all myself, setting all the program booklets and producing or setting the banners, doing the graphics, then organizing the tent, getting all the permits, all the connections, and so on and so on and so forth. At that time, I also got a call from the manager of Eric Burdon, the singer from the Animals, asking if I wanted to go on tour with him as a pianist. Just me at the piano with him singing and then presenting his autobiography as part of the tour. It went through Germany, Turkey, and Greece, and of course I said yes. You can't miss the chance. One of the greatest rock stars of all time, and that's how it was. And after a month of concerts after the tour, we decided, or he decided, to take a drummer with him, and so Pete York from the Spencer Davis Group joined us on the drums and played the rest of the concerts. Now, as a quasi-no-name musician, I got to know 2 of the greatest and most influential musicians in rock history within 2 or 3 months. And then I came back from the tour, of course, organized the festival again. It was already pretty far advanced. We didn't have the whole organization except for the lineup yet, and I just came back from the tour and had the idea to do the festival in the context of stars singing Boogie Woogie, and that's how it turned out. One phone call to Eric Burdon and Pete York was enough. Fortunately, they immediately agreed to sing Boogie Woogie with us and come to the festival, and then of course the mood among us organizers at Fritz and me was boiling. What do we do now? We have to make this really cool. We have to make the coolest festival, and with that lineup we had at least had the coolest lineup, and now we have to make the whole thing cool. And, of course, the work and brainstorming went on.
The tent was to be built on a footbridge above the Schwarzsee, so that the audience could see the lake behind the stage and the Kaiser in the background. And another point that wasn't considered, the bathers had to leave the area for the setup. This turned into a huge mess. There was no storm option. "It'll be fine" was always Christoph's motto. A larger tent was organized. Beginners' mistakes piled up. The backstage area could only be reached through the audience. Lighting was relatively simple. Shuttle service for artists was organized at short notice. Entrance wristbands ran out. And last but not least, the costs were skyrocketing. As the festival was extended to 3 days and the fixed opening evening on Thursday in the city center with 5 stages and free admission caused extreme costs. An enormous psychological stress became noticeable. The festival takes place in July, but the budget expenditure of the festival takes place in the previous September. Then it will be 10 months of trembling as to whether the almost 80,000 euros can be recouped. The majority of the money only comes in with the box office. Accident insurance was simply forgotten in the first 2 years. It's unthinkable what can happen at thousands of people. Last but not least, heavy thunderstorms were forecast for the main evening. Sleepless nights were the order of the day. The circulatory collapse was already pre-programmed 1 day before the festival started.
Yes, the last few days before the festival are of course full throttle. Will the tent arrive? Do you have to help set up the tent? We were, as I said, newcomers, and then the first evening started, the Thursday evening, which we also took part in this year, via the TVB, and it was the most beautiful evening. It was so warm in the evening. The town was completely overcrowded. 45 minutes before the concert started, there were thousands of people in the center of Kitzbühel. We had 4 or 5 stages in the first year, and unfortunately I never got to enjoy it. Only 10 years later, when it was all over, I think I enjoyed it at the 10th anniversary. At the last festival, because there's so much going on in your head, I was completely out of the loop for 10 years, and then you go from one stage to the next, and someone says to you, "Great concert, bravo. Next year again. Are there any tickets left for tomorrow?" Then you get a call. The power isn't working on stage 4. You still have to sort it out. But in the meantime, you should already be starting your concert on stage 2. Then you send someone else to start the concert for you, and after 2 numbers you join them, and on the way over, sprinting over anyway, someone claps you on the shoulder again. Woo, we were so looking forward to it. And then, yes, great that you're here. And then you come over and one of the musicians wants to know, "Where can I get a drink here? I'm so thirsty." Then you give him, "Of course, we forgot to put drinks in the fridge for the artists on Thursday. Another 30 euros to get something to drink. No problem." And yes, there's just so much that you forget or that goes around in your head. Then the biggest worry for me was, you're sitting on stage and you have to create an atmosphere, but in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, you've put so much money forward. If there are thousands of people there today with free entry, will anyone come tomorrow if you have to buy tickets, or the day after tomorrow? Will there be enough people there to get to about 0? Will the weather be nice? If it's bad, will even fewer people come? And it's simple. Your head almost explodes, but it was a huge success the first evening, the opening night, and then we did an after party. I've already seen that at Shake the Lake. After party was always the best thing for me. You're really close to the people. Everyone plays what they want, even what they're not so good at, and it goes on until dawn. And I didn't do an after party one day. I did it every day. I added an after party to every festival evening, and it was indescribable. You can't describe it. There was so much joie de vivre. People were in a good mood. Everyone was laughing. Everyone was dancing. Everyone was singing along.
In the home stretch, sleep almost completely fails. That means the last few days before the festival starts, there are numerous meetings and visits. Then the tent is erected and materials such as barriers, tarpaulins, beer benches, bar tables, etc. are delivered. Due to the rain 2 days ago, a floor to the wet meadow has to be organized at short notice. Extra costs again. On Wednesday, the construction of the after-party is set up in a non-existent break window, in between phone calls, in a continuous loop. Then Thursday morning, after a restless night, it's time for the final setup at 9 a.m. Will all the stages be set up on time? The piano tuner has delivered all 5 pianos, but only 4 piano benches, so quickly into the car, home, and get a piano bench. On the way, another call from the sound engineer. He's missing 2 boxes. After a small detour via the rehearsal room, this problem is solved. The first musicians are already arriving and asking for the hotel address. The information sheet for the artists, which had already been sent out 4 weeks earlier, is sent again by SOS. The anticipation is quickly put on hold when a star guest cancels 2 weeks in advance.
You always try to complete as much as possible beforehand, to prepare so that you don't have any more work on the day of the festival. That's nonsense, of course. There's always something you forget or something doesn't work out. The organizers will know, of course. It's our daily bread, but the problem for us was that there were only 2 of us. We're not 20 people, not a team of people. I can't tell anyone. You go there, get this, drive over there quickly, do this. We were just the 2 of us, and then on the day of the event, you're on your way to set up the piano and adjust the pianos, do the sound checks. And then things like artists calling and saying, doesn't matter anyway, we're coming as a couple. The wife is coming with us, and we've got the child with us too. Does it work with the room? Of course it works, because I always want the artists to feel comfortable. Then you quickly call the hotel, turn a single room into a double room with a crib, and so on and so on. Then things like that come in all the time. You forget another cable at home. Then you realize that there is no time left for dinner. Then you do a quick sound check for the after party to make sure that everything fits, that you can start as soon as the concert is over. Then you drive over to the main stage, to the open air, and set up the grand pianos, position them and roughly adjust them, and meanwhile, the artists are already eating. You quickly get changed. Greet the artists again at the back, and then the concert starts, speeches, and so on. I just want people to understand everything that's going on in one's mind when organizing something, that it's not just about showing up, playing, and seeing the artist smile. There's a lot happening in one's head if you want to do it perfectly.
The first concert hasn't even started yet and you're already on the ropes. You could sleep for 3 days straight. But there's no such thing as weakening. Only everything that happens on stage now will be noticed by the audience and, in the best case, remains in their minds. So gather all your energy and go full throttle.
I've always given 120%, and I still do today. It's rather unintentional. I don't even realize it myself. You go on stage, then the adrenaline kicks in, and then you dig in and the energy just bubbles out. You only see it when you see footage of people posting about how you played. Well, in any case, on the penultimate evening you give your all at the after party. After 3 hours of sleep, you get up and check your emails to see if there are any ticket reservations, if there are any other requests, which is usually the case anyway. And then you drive up once, set up the after party, adjust the bass, drums and piano roughly so that the concert can start right after the last final evening with the after party.
There are still countless little things that should be considered. Surely you can simply set the sound check for 4 p.m., or you can assign the musicians to certain times to shorten the waiting time for the artists. Or you can opt for the more elaborate version and discuss with each artist in advance when they would prefer it to take place and then draw up a soundcheck plan. This time-consuming version was abandoned after 2 years. You phone and email each artist 5 times back and forth, then you try to create a reasonably clear plan, and when the time comes, the artists have either forgotten, have been hiking longer in the mountains, or tell you on the day of the concert that they don't need a soundcheck. What this part of the chapter should describe is that there is a lot more work behind an event, whatever the type of event that you might think. Of course, you can book 3 musicians, print out a few flyers, set up 1 electric piano and play. But it all depends on how much passion you put into the project. And the nice thing is, as in almost all professions, There are endless possibilities for spicing up a project. And, as I said, it's not always just about the money. Passion and time, which are in short supply these days. And let's not forget the killer of every event, envy.
Und das war wahrscheinlich auch der Grund,
And that was probably also the reason why I retired the festival after 10 years, because you put so much energy, time and money into the project. For example, the first 5 years I made at least a loss of 5,000, although I worked more than full time for it, and then people say, why should we support him or give him the money so that he can earn even more? Maybe.
dann kommen so Sachen.
I never did it for the money, because otherwise I would have budgeted very differently. Maybe I should have booked fewer grand pianos and played more on electric pianos, because that saves a lot of money.
Weil sonst hätte ich
I could have saved money on artists, not just big name artists, but also a few others, but I always wanted to get the maximum out of it. I wanted to do the best possible thing, then I had an idea and I wanted to realize it.
sondern auch ein paar andere. Aber ich
And, as I said, if I had done it for money, I would have had to budget completely differently.
Geld gemacht hätte, hätte ich ganz anders budgetieren müssen.
And then I realized that the bigger and more popular the festival became, the more envy there was, and I never understood why you can't work together and then create something really big by working together.
Zusammenarbeiten kann.
But envy is just a world beast, I say. And unfortunately, that's the way it is.
Lassen kann. Aber der Neid ist einfach ein Weltviech, sage ich mal, und ist leider so.
Year after year, the costs piled up. Suddenly, you had to apply for entry permits for the sound engineer plus piano supplier at short notice to get the equipment out of town.
Ich habe dann einfach irgendwie nicht verstanden, warum hat man so viel extra.
I just somehow didn't understand, why do you have so much extra stress over so many little things? Like us, for example. We had to pay 180 euros for entry permits into the city, for the piano tuner to collect his pianos after the concert, or for the sound technician to dismantle his sound system. Stamp duty, who arranged this, is irrelevant, but we just had to do it. That was stress and extra costs for us again. It was all at such short notice, and I just thought to myself, well, if you just drive into the city and stand there with your car, you get a 20 euros ticket, and that's what we did. I saved 160 euros on each car, and I've also seen that it's sometimes easier elsewhere. For example, I was artistic director of the Baden-Baden Boogie Nights during the festival, and I learned a lot. And it was a big festival.
Künstlerische Leitung gemacht. Und da habe ich sehr viel gelernt auch und war ein großes Festival. Die schönste
The nicest realization I took away from the festival is that on the last evening, on the main evening, when the rough stress has fallen away from the whole body, I have halfway registered the environment again. When I stand there on the stage or backstage and watch the whole thing, when the artists are up there playing and having fun, that they come alive, and when I look over the artists, over the stage into the audience, there are celebrities, there are rich people, there are poor people, there are from Mo people, there are from moped riders to Porsche drivers, prominent actors, all mixed together. Nothing sealed off with VIPs. They are really mixed together. Everyone is having fun. Everyone is talking to everyone. Everyone has a grin on their face. Everyone is happy. Everyone is cheerful. Everyone has forgotten their current problems, and that's when you see and experience something like that. I think that's what has driven me to organize the festival anew. Every time, and probably we should have just been a bigger team, just more people, then maybe we would have kept doing it. But it was a great time. I learned a lot, and it was really worth learning.
Chapter 3. The Low Point. After 10 years of organizing the Steinbach Boogie Woogie and Blues Festival, the decision was made. Due to the organizational and financial stress, the attacks of dizziness and fatigue became more frequent. Panic attacks were the order of the day for the last 5 festival years. It is finally decided the festival ends with the 10th grand finale.
Yes, it certainly wasn't the festival alone. At that time, I was also building a house, starting a great family, and still playing up to 5 concerts a week. Fortunately, the level of recognition had increased enormously and the fees have also risen as a result. But unfortunately, I had overlooked something very important.
Too much work? Disposition? Stress? You can't say for sure what's the trigger for such an illness. Countless visits to the doctor and therapies were on the agenda. That's how fast everyday life can change. And every time, a different but flawless medical result.
The values were always optimal. The blood values, MRT, in the tube. The doctors sometimes even asked me if I was a sport climber or top athlete because the results showed that.
And yet, the panic attacks piled up. They even increased to the point of being unbearable.
You can't really explain it to anyone who hasn't had it themselves. They just wouldn't understand it. The person opposite may say, "Oh, that's bad," and so on. But basically, they don't understand what it means, how much it eats you up or affects you.
Being hauled out of bed 2 times a month by the emergency doctor because you can't take another step was not uncommon. And if you are able to leave the bed, weekly visits to the doctor determine the routine. And again, all the results are perfect.
Luckily, I was never depressed. I was always sent home by the doctors with the words, "Top values, top results. You are extremely healthy."
Shopping, queuing at the checkout and meetings become a torture. Concerts and traveling almost impossible. But only 2 concerts were cancelled. 1 concert was ended early. Struggling through all the other concerts was laborious. As a result, future requests and confirmations were limited to a quarter. Days before the concert, all thoughts circle around the upcoming concert. The stressful journey, the soundcheck, and then hopefully no panic may come up, especially on stage.
The whole thing had been building up for days before the concert. The worst part was the journey and the concert itself. It always subsided when I drove back in at home. But the level of panic or feeling unwell was actually constant, and as I played 3/4 fewer concerts, I naturally had less income, and the stress with the house loan also increased.
Und da hat dann der Stress mit dem Hauskredit auch zugenommen.
Weeks of spending time on the couch became more frequent. There was no thought of working out the programs and pursuing the career. The main thing was to somehow get the next concerts done.
I had so many brilliant ideas for shows and concepts already written, and at that time I also had requests from renowned agents or managers who would have signed me. One of them, for example, he once said on the phone, had already worked out a concept for me with floating grand pianos through the hall and so on. Really great shows that could have gone through the roof, but I couldn't even dream of it. My answer was always simply, "Thanks for asking, but I'm not doing that at the moment."
Einfach immer nur danke für die Anfrage, aber das mache ich im Moment nicht.
After all, traveling alone was no longer possible. Flights were out of the question. Friends drove the rocker extreme pianists to gigs all over Germany, France, and Hungary. Overseas performances such as America, the Bahamas, or Brazil were not confirmed.
Wenn euch einmal jemand anspricht,
If someone approaches you and wants to talk about this disease or tells you that they have it, please take it seriously. I think it's one of the worst diseases there is. Well, you can't give tips anyway because it's so individual. Everyone has it for a different reason that you usually don't think of, but take it seriously anyway. And to those who have it, I think you can learn to live with it. Just do things that are good for you. For example, make music or go to a concert and listen to music.
Gut tun, zum Beispiel Musik machen oder zum Konzert gehen und Musik zuhören.
Finally, after more than 20 years of chaos, a book, sport, and abstaining from alcohol helped to ease the illness.
Weg? Na.
No, it's not gone, but I can live with it at the moment.
Chapter 4. Christoph Steinbach and Stars. The years of project work naturally also brought many positive things. Successful festivals, gaining valuable experience, and getting to know notable personalities.
I've never really seen the big stars as stars. I've always treated every musician equally.
Most of the acquaintances developed into close friendships.
I never booked a musician through agents or management. Always personally, and if I get on well with him, then he gets booked. That's always been a basic rule of mine.
There is no negotiating with agents or managements. Only the personal contact with the artist counts for him.
Ja, mein größter Star war mit Sicherheit
My biggest star was definitely Eric Burdon. How that came about is also a hot story. You can compare it to From Dishwasher to Millionaire. Indeed, I got a call from Eric Burdon's tour manager, and he said, "I've been to your concerts from time to time, secretly, and you're in the final selection together with Joe Bonsack and Axel Zwingenberger. One of you is going on tour with Eric Burdon. Just me on the piano, or the one who was selected and Eric Burdon on vocals." And I said, "Bo, that would be amazing for me, but I don't stand a chance against those two anyway, against Axel Zwingenberger and Joe Bonsack." 2 weeks later, I got a call saying that Eric chose you, and then within a month, the concert, the tour started and I arrived, and then, in the foyer of the hotel, we met at the grand piano. Eric Burdon came in, and I wondered, wow, that's Eric Burdon, and how should I greet him now? Hello? Service, or hi, or good evening, and in a case the chemistry was right straight away, we joked around, we talked naturally, and then we played the songs on the hotel grand piano, every song I think, only he didn't even sing a complete verse, and then he said, "Yeah, that's fine. Next song," and then we went up to the room, and in the evening we were picked up for the first concert, and that's how our tour started in Germany. We didn't actually rehearse anything. We just went on stage and played, and it worked. That's how it was back then. It was really cool.
mehr oder weniger nichts geprobt, sind auf die Bühne und haben einfach gespielt und es hat funktioniert. Ja, so war das damals.
And suddenly, you're on tour with one of the biggest rock stars in music history. Jazz clubs, city halls, and a sold-out 10,000-man tent were the workplace of this explosive duo in the summer of 2003.
Presenters, actors, big concert promoters. Everyone wants to meet Eric. After the concert, you'd go out for dinner with them and then move around the houses, to bars, to clubs, and listen to the funny stories they had to tell. So it was very amusing and exciting for me. The whole experience with them all in one place, all the big names.
Großen Namen.
Finally, this concert series was extended by 2 tours through Greece and Turkey. For that, this dynamic duo was upgraded with a drum kit.
Und plötzlich
And suddenly, we had another star in the lineup. Pete York from the Spencer Davis Group. I still play concerts with him today.
Hello.
When a camera crew is waiting outside your hotel room door for you to come out, you already feel like a little star. And that's how you were treated.
I left the hotel room to get something from the vending machine, and the camera crew followed me everywhere I went and filmed me, even though I was only Eric Burdon's pianist. So for me, it was very funny. Well, the day before we had played on the Greek Wetten Das.
Pete York and Christoph Steinbach founded Drum Boogie in 2007. In this lineup, the two continued to delight their audiences.
Playing with Pete York is really fun. He's a rock star who's always loved jazz. He listens extremely well to what the other musician plays and responds to it. And he's also a brilliant old-school entertainer, a great singer, and a very, very nice guy.
Through his friendship with Pete, he also got to know other stars for his projects. For his festival, musicians such as John Lord, Chris Farlow, Tony Sheridan or Chris Barber were booked.
It feels kind of unreal when the stars come in and out of your home. Eric Burden comes by, stands beside the grand piano and sings House of the Rising Sun. The fifth Beatle, Tony Sheridan, unpacks his guitar and sings My Bonnie is Over the Ocean. Then Chris Andrews sits down on the couch and sings I'm Her Yesterday Man, or Chris Barber comes in at the rehearsal room door and asks me if he can have a coffee. I go upstairs, make a coffee in the meantime. He takes out his trombone downstairs and plays Ice Cream with Pete. That's unbelievable. In retrospect, I didn't even notice it at the time. I never took any photos because I wasn't that interested. I just wanted to make nice music with them. But now in retrospect, it would have been cool to take a few photos well.
He also developed a good relationship with Mungo Jerry and Gus Bacchus over the years.
Long-legged woman dressed in black, Lady Rose, in the summertime. If you are allowed to play the numbers with the respective performers, you have done more right than wrong, I would say. Gus Bacchus may not have been my biggest star, but for me he was certainly one of the highlights. Not only because he was such a nice guy and stayed down to earth, but certainly also because I had seen all the films as a child and heard his music. Brauner Bö, Häuptling der Indianer, Sauerkraut Polka, Bohnen in den Ohren, and he really stepped on the gas at the concerts. I can still remember at the Tenning Kitzbühel, at the festival when I had invited him, he jumped on the table while singing, pushed the glasses to the side a bit with his feet and stepped on the gas, sang rock and roll so extremely well and always had a smile on his face.
But the personal highlights were stars of the boogie scene. One of the world's most successful boogie pianists, Axel Zwingenberger, as well as his imaginary teacher, Vince Weber.
I can still remember. Back then I had an apartment in Kitzbühel with an electric piano in it, and I practiced there. I had records of 3 artists, Vince Weber, Axel Zwingenberger, and Michael Puny, and I learned the numbers back then, and then I got a call from my mom. I was already in my pajamas and she said, "You, just next door in Kitzbühel, we're sitting there in a hotel and there's some boogie-woogie playing." I was told to come over. I changed my clothes, immediately walked the 400 or 500 meters over, came in at the door, and thought I couldn't see properly. Al Cook was standing on the first table between the glasses with his electric guitar, and behind him was Michael Puny at the piano, from whom I learned all the numbers back then, and of course I listened, and my mouth was open. Finally, my first Boogie Woogie live concert. And I didn't even have to drive far. I then bought all the CDs they had, and from that day on, I practiced 6 to 8 hours a day because I wanted to experience what they were doing live. I also wanted to be on stage and play big concerts like that. But my absolute highlight, as far as musicians are concerned, is still Vince Weber from Hamburg. The rolling left hand, the rich left hand that doesn't need a band, the ideas he has, the relatively modern style of playing boogie-woogie, a Hamburg native with a soul voice.
I wanna play the boogie back like everybody else. 'Cause I'm the boogeyman. Yeah, I'm the boogeyman. Said I'm the boogeyman. But I'm the boogeyman.
Unfortunately, the style of living, the musician's life, took him from us far too early. But if he hadn't lived the musician's style, I don't think he would have become the musician he was. Vince Weber.
Gelebt hätte, wäre er, glaube ich, auch nicht der Musiker geworden, was er gewesen ist. Vince Weber.
Yeah, but everything all right with the boogeyman.
Chapter 5: Traveling. As a musician, you cover countless kilometers. Whether by car, camper, cab, train, plane, yes, even helicopters and private jets become the artist's faithful companions. You perform in places where others go on vacation. North Sea and Baltic Sea, Rome, Côte d'Azur, Paris, Greece, Croatia, Bahamas, New Orleans, Beijing. Although Christoph is rarely able to enjoy the trips due to his illness, they are always great experiences.
Wenn es die Gage zulässt,
When your salary allows you to fly business class to Beijing for a gig, be picked up by a private limousine service, and then be accommodated in a 300 square meter presidential suite, and take a short walk on the Great Wall of China or in the Forbidden City before the sound check, it makes you a little proud that you've made it this far.
in den Stadt, dann macht einen das schon ein bisschen stolz, dass man es so weit gebracht hat.
Among so many successful artists, the family falls by the wayside. At the weekend, when the children spend their free time, you're on tour, and during the vacations is high season. If there's also a concert on weekdays, the days before are spent sightseeing and traveling.
Ja, Sightseeing oder einen Tag früher anreisen, um etwas zu besichtigen.
Sightseeing or arriving a day early to visit something,
Ich bin immer am gleichen Tag
I've
angereist.
never done that. I always arrived on the same day and took the first plane back the next day. Or I left early for Normandy, for example, then drove 12 hours, 13 hours there by car, and then got in the car after the concert and drove back the same way, and of course you go stupid. You think of all sorts of nonsense.
All möglicher Blödsinn ein.
For example, we once drove to Normandy. Me and a show drummer from Vienna, Heini Oldbart.
In die Normandie
We
gefahren.
got lost 3 or 4 times, and then at some point we arrived in Switzerland at the border, I think at 1 or 2 in the morning, and we couldn't think of anything more stupid. The track drivers were asleep in the parking lot at the huge border station, and we carefully removed the drums from the back of the car and put them in the parking lot, and then started drumming so that they would wake up one after the other. Jokes on the side of the road.
Und haben dann voll darauf losgetrommelt, dass die der Reihe nach aufwachen. Ah, Scherze am Rande der Straße.
In the meantime, a more relaxed approach to traveling is taken. Arrivals are started relaxed the day before, or concerts are combined with a camping trip.
Water, chocolate, adelettes. That's all I need.
Ja, man erlebt wirklich die skurrilsten
You
Anreise.
really experience the most bizarre travel variations. For example, I was once asked if I would play at a private party somewhere. Then I said I didn't have time because I had a gig at the same time.
Dann hat er gesagt, kein
I think I
Problem.
played in Kitzbühel. Then he said,
Hol dich
no problem.
nach dem Soundcheck
I'll
ab.
pick you up after the sound check with my helicopter. Then we'll fly to Switzerland. You'll play a number there, a show interlude. Then I'll fly you back again by helicopter. Then you'll be back in time for the start of the concert. So all the possibilities there are, or some of the possibilities that really come true, I thought that only existed in films. But now and then ideas like that come from the organizers who want to implement them, and now I really do travel one, too. 3 or maybe 4 days earlier, or I no longer fly to Nice. But I go by camper van and take a bit more time and just drive down the route to all the campsites and take it a bit more relaxed.
Ich fahre mit einem Campingbus.
The advantage is that you don't really live out of a suitcase. You don't always have to pack and unpack. You have your hotel room with you in your bag.
Man lebt nicht wirklich aus dem Koffer, man muss nicht immer einpacken, auspacken, sondern man hat das Hotelzimmer in der Tasche mit dabei.
As a musician, you are also a kind of globetrotter. You see all kinds of different cultures, food specialties and sites. The way festivals are organized also varies from continent to continent.
Was für ein Ohr.
Ja, es ist äußerst interessant, wenn man das mitbekommt, wie wer ein Festival organisiert.
It's very interesting to see how a festival is organized. For example, in Austria, Germany, or whatever, everything is strictly scheduled. 3 p.m. sound check. Admission is at that time. Then the concert starts. Then there's a break. Then CD sales. Then the concert is over. Then there's an after party, and then a week later when you play a festival, the Jazz Festival on the Bahamas. It says 3 p.m. sound check. You get there for the sound check. No one there. No grand piano. No stage. No sound technician. Nothing. The concert is supposed to start at 5 p.m. You wait half an hour. Nothing happens. You leave again. Then you get there at 5 p.m. Still no piano there, but a sound engineer, and he says to you, I'm gonna get in the car and get cables, mixer, and speakers at home. And somehow at 6 p.m. the piano arrives, and the concert starts again at 6:30. So it's all seen in a much more relaxed way there. Even the audience just joins in at some point when they hear the music. Some of the musicians come even later, plug their instruments into the mixing desk, and then just play along. So it's all much, much, much more relaxed, and whether that's better or worse, I don't know, but they're definitely very relaxed.
Besser oder schlechter ist, weiß ich nicht. Auf jeden Fall sind sie sehr entspannt.
When you finally arrive at the hotel, you are usually awaited by a stuffed program. The organizer is happy that the artist has arrived, wants to spoil him, and has organized a lot. Mostly good food at the hotspot of the particular city, short meeting with the media, and a visit to the most important sites, including the venue, although you will see it in just 2 hours anyway.
Dass man die unterschiedlichsten Spezialitäten des Landes isst.
The fact that you can eat all the different specialties of the country and see the sights of the respective city is great, I have to say. But sometimes you just want to take a nap in the hotel for 2 or 3 hours after your arrival. Everything used to be different in the early days. You'd arrive, go straight to the first bar, hotel bar, or into town, drink a few beers, have fun, and then go straight to the concert. But you can't do that anymore if you've been doing it for a few years.
Aber das geht nicht mehr, wenn man das schon ein paar Jahre macht.
Finally, you can stay at the hotel for half an hour before the shuttle service is already waiting to get you to the soundcheck at the concert hall. From then on, it's like being on a movie set. Waiting, waiting, and waiting again. The backstage room becomes your second home.
Mich wundert's ehrlich gesagt nicht, dass Musiker.
To be honest, I'm not surprised that musicians or actors also turn to cigarettes or alcohol, because you have a lot of waiting time on set or backstage. You're waiting from 3, 4 p.m. at the latest until midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. So, the concert, if you have a solo concert, if you're booked as a solo pianist, then you're on stage for at least 3 hours. But if you play at festivals, which is often the case where other artists are also performing, then you're on stage for a maximum of 15 to 20 minutes. The rest is waiting.
dann ist man maximal 15 bis 20 Minuten auf der Bühne. Der Rest ist warten, warten, warten.
Important. After sweating, sugar. I didn't sweat at all today. Never mind.
Man könnte natürlich auch.
Of course, you could also take a book with you and read, but who does that?
Wer macht das schon?
Then it's off to dinner or a club with the sponsors, organizers, and their most important partners and friends. And then, at some point, you look forward to going to bed.
Ja, und am nächsten Tag geht's dann zum Flughafen.
And then the next day, it's off to the airport, and you travel on to the next gig, or it's off home, where everything is completely normal again. Because most of the neighbors or locals who know me don't even know that I'm on the road so much, or what concerts I have, or they think that I only play in the Kitzbühel district. And they just say, ah, Stavi is playing again, setting up his piano, creating a bit of atmosphere, and it's all good that it's like that.
Klavier auf, macht ein bisschen Stimmung. Und das ist auch alles gut, dass das so ist.
Chapter 6. The Next Generation. A newborn evolves into a grandfather. A new car becomes a classic car. A blooming rose becomes a wilted flower. That's how you could describe the development of the scene. What was bill posting back then is now a post on Instagram, Facebook, and co. The first priority is usually one's own reputation. A video practicing in a short, skin-tight dress, plus a little more makeup than usual and a sexy look into the camera that gains clicks and likes.
Die meisten Menschen lassen sich
Most people are still blinded by this sexy, sexy, sexy. Yes, it has to be a bit, and that's a good thing, but many artists invest so much time in how do I position myself? How do I look good in the video or photo, and don't focus on what it's all about, the music itself. What should the groove be for the number? How should the left hand sound? How should the right hand sound? How should they sound together? How do I play this number? I think that so many artists could be so much better if they focused a bit more on how do I play the number than how do I look on the video.
legen würden, wie spiele ich die Nummer, als wie schaue ich auf dem Video aus.
Is that just the way it is now, in the new social media age? After all, this type of advertising and presentation works.
Of course, I didn't have those options back then. Maybe I would have used them. I don't know. But of course, at the beginning, I spent a lot of time dealing with the groove of the left hand.
Hand befasst, wie spiele ich
How do I play this? How does it sound like on the record? And I was annoyed for hours. I also got up half an hour early before school back then just so that I could practice the piano a bit more. I'd sit there, take only my left hand and say, does it sound better now? The melody I play on the right, when I play it straight, the groove.
wenn ich die Grad spiele, den Groove, das ist ein gerader.
That's a straight, choppy groove.
Klingt,
Does it sound better like this, or does it sound better if I play it a bit more swingy, with more shuffle? Or even with more shuffle. And once I've figured out the groove, which version I'm playing, I try playing the little finger a little louder or softer. It's not really noticeable, but subconsciously you do notice it. You have to get into it. You have to practice, practice, practice. And yes, I was more concerned with these things than with photos.
in Sachen habe ich mich befasst und weniger mit Fotos.
The music scene, or how music is perceived by the public, has changed enormously in the last 20 years. The surprise effect at the concert and the anticipation of the artist is no longer as great when you can see countless videos of the current tour on the internet in advance.
I found it more exciting when you didn't know exactly who was coming or what was happening, because in the past you just read a poster and it said Boogie and Blues Night or Rock Night or whatever, and the artists were listed. You didn't know most of the artists anyway, and you didn't know exactly what was going to happen that night. Nowadays, you have YouTube and everything, and you can watch all kinds of videos of every artist, even the current ones, the big stars. If they're on tour, for example, and they've already played their first 2 concerts, you can see what the stage set is like, what numbers they're playing, and so on and so forth. You didn't have all that back then. You were curious to see what would happen in 2 weeks. The concert that's on the poster in 2 weeks. What kind of stage design do they have? How elaborate are they doing it? What are the artists like? What exactly are they playing? You don't know the names, and I found that very exciting. That's why the atmosphere or the anticipation of the audience used to be a bit different than it is nowadays. They come and they already know what the artist is like and what numbers she or he's playing and so on. You didn't know all that back then. It was always such a surprise effect, the goodie bag.
Überraschungseffekt, die Wundertüte.
What a feeling it must be when you meet an artist you've adored for years and meticulously and sometimes desperately studied their way of making music. Then one day you meet them in person at a concert where you are also a performer.
When I got to know the musicians and idols of my previous generation, such as Axel Zwingenberger, Joe Bonesack, and so on, or then later the rock stars Eric Burden, Mungo Jerry, Chris Farlow, Chris Andrews, and so on, somehow the feeling inside me was more like joy, excitement, and above all, awe. I can still remember at a concert where I was a member of the audience and Axel Zwingenberger was also in the audience, and the musician who was playing that evening called me on stage for a number because he already knew me and said, up-and-coming artists, and so on. And Axel Zwingenberger was sitting 3 seats in front of me, and I got up and wanted to go on stage, and then on the way to the stage, I asked Axel, "Excuse me, Mr. Zwingenberger, may I play a number of yours?" And then of course he was happy, and I played the number, and the whole thing with respect from the better-known artist. I think that is something that's unfortunately been lost nowadays.
Respekt vom bekannteren Künstler, finde ich, ist heutzutage leider etwas verloren gegangen.
In the past, you were happy to be allowed to take part in the festival. Nowadays, newcomers occasionally demand individual backstage rooms. Respect for long-standing, successful colleagues is constantly decreasing.
Man darf das natürlich nicht alles schlecht.
Of course, you can't talk it all down. There are a lot of young artists who are coming up who organize great festivals, who organize big festivals, who put a lot of energy and heart and soul into it, and who also play the piano incredibly well. I think one thing is getting a bit lost these days, and that's the real characters like it was back then. I always like to compare it to WWF. That's what it was called back then. Wrestling in the 90s. Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker, Razor Ramon. They were characters. They came onto the stage and something happened. He steps onto the stage with his first foot, doesn't say anything yet, and you feel something inside you. Something wow. And yes, I don't think that's the case in wrestling anymore. There are no more characters. No more appearances.
Im Wrestling nicht mehr der Fall. Es gibt keine Charaktere mehr, keine Erscheinungen.
Dean Martin, B.B. King, Aerosmith, AC/DC, Ella Fitzgerald, or in the boogie scene, Vince Weber, Bob Seeley, Al Copley, Axel Zwingenberger. These are or were artists who triggered something in the audience just by stepping on stage. And that is precisely an artist's mission. To unleash something in people through his performance and give them a wonderful experience or make a sad one easier. Chapter 7. Projects. In the many creative minds of artists, ideas for a wide variety of projects are bubbling over, waiting to be realized. Or should we say hobbies? Project sounds a lot more professional, of course. Whether these are actually realized depends on the ambition of the person in question. It often ends up being just an idea, and the consistency is lost, or the implementation proves to be too complicated.
I have so many projects in my head. You can imagine it like a cooking pot with a lid on, which then gets so hot and everything boils over. The lid lifts. Or the story with the porridge with the girl. The porridge boils over, spreads all over the country. That's roughly how it is in my head. I've always done the projects, and I still like doing them, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing them. It's a hobby, so to speak. I actually put more or less all of my earnings into it. Is it smart or not? You don't know. We'll see. I think, well, if you do it with love, there's not much that can go wrong, and luckily, the project I had in mind in my mid-20s, a radio show with a friend, a blues radio show. I didn't realize, I think I was too young then, it wouldn't have worked out. Now I think I would have the confidence to do it.
At probably the biggest project, the 10 years Steinbach Boogie Woogie and Blues Festival, you could already see another of Christoph's passions, his love of old vehicles.
Frühling, Sommer und
I always drive my classic cars in spring, summer, and fall. They're a lot more fun and require less maintenance than the newer cars. And the cool thing is that you can screw around yourself.
He has also been captivated by the film industry. How do you capture a scene with the camera so that it also triggers tension in the viewer? How do you light it? And how do you write a captivating screenplay? What happens in the editing department? How does acting work?
die Filmindustrie hat mich gefesselt.
The film industry has captivated me. I find it incredibly exciting, and it started back in the Corona period, where I started the project with Daniel Eckelbauer, a great pianist and singer. By the way, I started the project with him. We are going to interview all the boogie, woogie, and blues stars of the 70s and 80s. And this is how we did it. We took the old bus, this telephone, and Herbert and Horst. In this case, Herbert and Horst were the two of us, and we were guys from the 80s who were then transported here on this bus to the present day to see how the boogie-woogie scene from back then was doing. And we had 1 star per episode, sitting in the back of the moving car. We interviewed them and did it very simply at that time with the GoPro cameras. At the end, I said, we need to improve the filming. We're going to buy cameras for the last 2 or 3 episodes, where you can also zoom in. We did, and that's when I really got a taste for it. Everything that has to do with films, the film industry, preparation and lighting. We then also bought spotlights and so on, and I grew into it. That's when I became really euphoric.
Da bin ich dann reingewachsen, da bin ich dann richtig euphorisch geworden.
More professional cameras, better lighting, and microphones were purchased. And again, you start from zero. Practicing, practicing, practicing.
Ich bin ja immer noch
I'm still a beginner, an apprentice sort of, but when I sometimes sit at home and zap through the TV, watching certain programs, I have to say, I've already come that far. And my next project, a bigger project, which is close to my heart and which I'm really looking forward to, is producing a movie, shoot it, make it myself, write it myself. The script is already finished, the camera book, everything that goes with it. Now I just need time, which is the most important thing, and money.
Geld.
So Christoph made Muppets for the first practice videos because the ones he bought didn't match his expectation.
For more training videos, I had made my own puppets at home. Muppets figures. I got a friend to join me, Ritter Stefan. He then learned to play puppets a bit, too, because of course, it's more fun when you do it with figures which make you laugh. Yes! And that's how the next practice videos came along.
Dann die nächsten Übungsvideos gekommen. Mon ami!
Another task he was determined to tackle was the restoration of pinball machines. What started out as one became many. And when one was broken, you had to repair it. Step by step, the know-how for these gaming tables grew.
Here! You're supposed to know your way around that, was what I also thought at first. It took a lot of time and nerves. Sleepless nights trying to figure out which cable goes where, how what works, and why does it suddenly work like that. But now I know my way around pretty well. At least I know where not to reach for.
The most obvious work, professionally speaking, is writing German songs. Even if they don't really fit into his tour program, a German piece is played from time to time. Nowadays, these songs would be called Schlager.
A lot of songs are being shoved into the pop folk drawer these days. Folk in German. Schlager is booming at the moment. I would classify my German songs more as German pop. I find it incredibly exciting what happens during the creation process of a song. You have something completely different in your head than what comes out at the end. That's how it usually is. You have a text in your head, which is usually only changed minimally, but then rhythmically. There's a lot potential in it, how the piece will turn out, whether it will be a ballad, whether it will be more rocky, whether it will be more of a pop number. For example, if you have a ballad in your head. Or you can change it and just make it a bit more rhythmic. It has a completely different effect, and you then phrase the vocals over it in a completely different way. And yes, it's exciting what always happens in the writing process, but my lifeblood is of course boogie-woogie, blues, and rock. I've been working on them all my life, and I still have a lot of fun playing them at concerts and practicing. When I still play the first boogie, which I practiced as a child, you play a little differently every time because you're in a different mood every time. And it's really fun every time, just like the first time. And as long as I still get applause, as long as people still come to my concerts, as long as I'm still allowed to give signatures, I'll keep doing it.
Solange noch Unterschriften geben darf, werde ich's auch machen.
An artist's life, one of many, the one of Christoph Steinbach. And yet it is exemplary for numerous independent musicians, creative minds, and all those who have dedicated their lives to the task of entertaining, moving, and perhaps inspiring people with their talents to try something new themselves, to create something unique. Just do it. There is a little or big artist in each one of you. People grow up in a wide variety of environments and circumstances, and thereby everyone shapes their lives differently. One person becomes a family man, another prefers to live alone. Some will be aggressive all their lives and slip into crime, while others feel drawn to social projects. One lives the life of a business manager, a top sportswoman, a housewife, or an artist. No matter what you choose, in everything you do or try out, the joy and fun of creating something new should always come first.
Alles vergessen zum Konzertbeginn 8. Es ist, wenn Künstler lachen, die Energie, die dadurch entsteht. Den Menschen Freude machen, wenn glücklich nach Hause geht. Die Probleme